Hello, everyone. Welcome to this part two of the complete marijuana training, marijuana awareness training, which is being hosted by Prevention Plus Wellness LLC out of beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. My name is Dr. Chudley Wirch, and I'm the president and founder at Prevention Plus Wellness. And it's my pleasure to be presenting this training for you. This training should last approximately an hour. And as I said, it's part two of a two-part training. The first part, if you missed it, is available on our website, preventionpluswellness.com. And part one discussed extensively the nature of marijuana, went into a good number of facets of what marijuana is, how it's consumed, how it works in the body, as well as a discussion of the risks, the harmful effects of marijuana. Excuse me. Today's training will focus on two goals. The first, which overlapped with part one, is to present evidence-informed information. And this type of information about marijuana is not all that easy to find. Unfortunately, most of the information, particularly online and even in the environment, billboards and so forth, is from the marijuana industry. It's more of a promotion than information, and it's not all that accurate oftentimes. So there's a great need for evidence-informed information. So what we're presenting today comes from solid sources, so for example, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and we'll cite those sources oftentimes and present the best and latest research that we know of. And in fact, we do provide a weekly blog where we continue to review the latest research and news regarding marijuana laws, the changes in laws, harm potential, potency, and so forth. Critical issues for those who are working in schools and business, community members and leaders, and those who want to keep their families safe. So the second goal for today is to focus on laws. We will talk about medical and recreational laws, legalization in the United States and throughout the world. And we will emphasize the prevention strategies, a little bit about treatment strategies that have been found to be effective. And lastly, we'll talk about slang terminology, a little bit about the culture of marijuana consumption. So let's jump into the marijuana laws. Marijuana at this point in time is legal for recreational use only by adults, that is by those aged 21 years and older, in 8 states in the United States and the District of Columbia. So these are the states. You can see the list of them, and DC at the bottom of that list. And I want to highlight that it is illegal and especially dangerous for minors under age 21 to use marijuana recreationally. It is allowed for minors usually with parental permission, and I should say always with parental permission, and sometimes other restrictions for minors to have access to marijuana for medicinal uses. But at this point, there have been not even a single study that has been conducted showing the efficacy of marijuana with any children or adolescents. So it's illegal for minors, and that's sort of different in comparison to, let's say, our neighbor to the north, Canada, where they're planning to roll out legalization for recreational use of marijuana throughout the entire nation next year, 2018. And the age that they're setting for legal use is 18. So they're actually going to allow 18, 19, 20-year-olds to use marijuana. And at least if you take a look at the literature, we talked a little bit about this in part one, that the brain is still forming. In fact, the brain formation continues into the mid-20s, usually around age 25, although it's variable from individual to individual. And so, because of what we know and what we presented in part one of this comprehensive marijuana training, we know about the deleterious effects of marijuana on brain formation, function, maybe even volume and conductivity, that it's really best to wait later than starting earlier with the use of marijuana, if at all. So these are the states where it's legal to use recreational marijuana use. Again, 8 states and the District of Columbia. And these laws are continually changing and evolving, and there's great differences across all the states that allow legalization, and there's even more differences, I think, with regard to medical use across states. And that's, of course, in great contrast to the federal government laws, which have marijuana still identified as a Schedule I drug, meaning it has no medical potential and has great potential for harm. So you've got this contrasting and sometimes conflicting federal legislation, and then you've got the state legislation allowing the use of this Schedule I drug, even though the feds have it as having no medical uses whatsoever. It is being used medically in a good number of states, which we'll talk about, and even recreationally. I think we need to really step back and take a look at the common myths about marijuana. Many of these myths drive use in marijuana and even legalization of marijuana. So it's important to take a look at myths before we discuss marijuana laws any further. These are common myths that you see in the literature, and you can go to any website that promotes marijuana use, any of the marijuana business sites, and you'll see these myths and misconceptions being discussed. So let's go down the list because I think they're important for everyone to consider, but particularly young people. So number one, marijuana is harmless. Of course, that's not accurate because marijuana, like all drugs, and marijuana is no different in this regard, poses both short and long-term physical, mental, and social risks for causing harm and pain and suffering within individuals and families and communities. So this risk that marijuana poses may be more or less than other types of drugs, but it does nonetheless exist, and it depends on the type of risk we're talking about. And we spent, again, quite a bit of time discussing this in the part one of our training. Number two, marijuana is not addictive. That is a myth. Marijuana, like all psychoactive substances, can be addictive and take over one's life. In other words, you could end up focusing on, marijuana use and arranging your life around marijuana use, and end up using marijuana day and night, and limiting other more healthy activities, for the purposes of utilizing marijuana. And this is certainly a very sad thing to see, and particularly destructive for anybody, but particularly youth. And so it is addictive. Marijuana is less addictive than I would say alcohol or other illicit drugs. However, and this is the key caveat, because marijuana is the number one used illicit drug throughout the country by youth and adults and throughout the world, you've got a much, much larger number of addicted people addicted and abusing marijuana. So you've got, according to federal statistics out of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, you've got 4 million individuals in this country that are dependent upon, have some dependency upon marijuana use. That's, I think, twice the dependency rate for prescription drugs, and I think 5 times for cocaine. Number three, the myth is that marijuana is safer to drive after using than after drinking alcohol. So this is one of those marijuana industry false comparisons, trying to show that marijuana is safer or better in some way than alcohol or prescription drugs or tobacco. And what it is just it's a marketing approach. It's an advertising or sales approach. So the reality is there is, like many of these myths and misconceptions, there is some truth to it, a kernel of truth, and that is if you do take a look at um, highway crash data, marijuana may be less dangerous than alcohol. However, research also shows that marijuana increases risk of a crash, at least doubles the risk, at least doubles the risk. So the issue is really not comparing marijuana to alcohol or other drugs. The issue is comparing marijuana to no substance use at all or driving completely safely. And marijuana use is and has been shown to at least double the chances of a car crash. There's some recent data I just saw today that showed for the first time that illegal drug use has surpassed alcohol use in car crash mortality. That's deaths associated with car crashes. And of the illegal drug use, these data showed that a third of those deaths were linked to cannabis use. Okay, risk number 4, marijuana is medicine, so it must be good for you. Of course, that's not true. Any medicine, whether it's prescription or over the counter, can be dangerous and even deadly. You don't have to look any further than the prescription drug crisis that we have in the nation, where prescription drugs are being misused, and there's tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of deaths associated with prescription drug use. The same with marijuana. If it's simply because it's labeled medicine does not mean that it cannot be dangerous or addictive, which it certainly can be. Number 5, the myth is, and this is from youth myth, is that if my parents used or currently use marijuana, it should be okay for me to use. But again, even in those states where there's legal marijuana use for medicinal purposes or for recreational purposes, there's a legal age for it, and there's efforts to keep the marijuana use out of the hands of young people because they're vulnerable to harm from marijuana use, mental, physical, social harm, and so addiction and so forth. So just because adults are allowed to use it doesn't mean that it's a good idea or that it's not dangerous for young developing brains, and that it might not, or that it could not, in fact, I should say, negatively affect one's learning and have a negative life-changing effects for young people. Item number 6, smoking marijuana is not as dangerous as smoking cigarettes. This is another one of those false comparisons by the marijuana industry. And we do have a sound evidence that smoking marijuana, particularly on a regular basis, is associated with increased lung infections, bronchitis, I think emphysema, and chronic coughs. And of course, the smoke in marijuana it's a combustible smoke. It has tar in it. It has a toxic particulate matter and smoke, and carcinogens in it. And I suppose the jury is still out as to whether marijuana is associated with cancer, but it does have cancer-causing material in it, more so even than tobacco does. So the truth is that marijuana smoke does cause lung damage. Item 7, marijuana is a good way to chill out, but any use of any drug to relax is not a healthy approach to use and can end up causing more stress in one's life because of problems with relationships and the law and school and work. So something that you might start to take some drug that you might take to chill out or to relax or to deal with the stress, particularly on a regular basis, can end up being the source of greater stress in your life. So a better way to deal with stress is a healthy way, which is through physical activity and healthy eating, getting adequate sleep, having good social relationships, and maybe even meditating or praying. And lastly, 8, everyone is using marijuana, of course, is a false um, normative belief, and those norms need to be corrected. Only a minority of individuals, a very, very small minority, I would say, of young people, and even a considerably small minority of adults, even in those states where there's a legal recreational use of marijuana, a small minority of individuals are using marijuana. And it's important to convey that to young people because they oftentimes have this incorrect perception that all of their peers are using. And some of this is driven, I think, unfortunately, by our own public health and education efforts, highlighting that there may be an increase in marijuana use among young people, but it is, in the end, it is a small minority of young people, and even a smaller minority using on any type of a regular or heavy basis, which is very dangerous. So what is this medical marijuana? What does it mean when we use the term medical marijuana? Medical marijuana is essentially the use of this crude cannabis plant. There's an illustration on the right. That's marijuana. It's the cannabis plant that has been dried, and then so medical marijuana is using that or extracts, more higher potent extracts, to treat a disease or a symptom. So essentially, you're taking the plant itself, the cannabis plant, which is the dried marijuana, or you're using a higher potency extract to treat some disease or some symptoms of a disorder disease. According to the California Society for Addiction Medicine, they believe this whole idea of medical marijuana is a flawed concept for 3 reasons. One, inhaling smoke of any type is not a good idea and is not healthy because of what we mentioned before, because of tars and carcinogens, both in the particulate matter and also in the smoke itself. Inhaling that is unhealthy and just not a way to take medicine, true medicine, into the body. Secondly, there's no standardization of dosing when you're smoking marijuana, for example, or using an extract, and that is very dangerous and makes it difficult to know if it's, if you're getting the right dose or overdosing. And then lastly, just forcing medical professionals, physicians in particular, to recommend marijuana for medicinal purposes and yet not follow the typical standards that are followed for other medicines, over-the-counter and prescription medicines, is problematic. So that's why at least one medical society has called the whole idea of medical marijuana a flawed concept. Related to that, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has not approved any, not approved marijuana, either in its dried format or in a concentrate, for any medical uses. And there have been no approved uses of, again, this idea of medical marijuana. Let's go through some more facts associated with that. At this point in time, there is absolutely insufficient human clinical trials to show the benefits outweigh the risks. And so when you take a look at the risk-benefit ratio, we just don't have the data. And if you go to websites and if you get information from the medical industry, I should say the cannabis industry, you'll oftentimes hear them talk about anecdotal data or, animal studies or, just hearsay that suggests that marijuana may be useful for this symptom or that ailment. But again, the clinical trials are simply not there, not the types of trials that are used of the size and the quality to not just determine the benefits, but again, to ensure that there aren't these associated risks, because remember, all drugs have risks associated with them. THC is currently available in a medicine form. This is synthesized THC in the United States and elsewhere. Dronabinol and Nabilone are currently two medicines in pill form that are available for nausea for patients undergoing chemotherapy because of cancer treatment, or wasting disease associated with AIDS to increase appetite. So those two synthetically produced medicines in pill form synthetically produce THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, the key most prevalent cannabinoid. And all of this, we talk more about in part 1 of the training. There are these two drugs. There's also a third drug, Sativex, that's currently used in the UK and also in Canada. That's been approved. It's an inhalant spray, and that is currently approved in those two countries, UK and Canada, for neuropathic pain associated with multiple sclerosis. So early research suggests that marijuana or specific plant or synthetic cannabinoids, either THC or CBD, and again, we talk more about these in part 1 of our training, they may be useful, and again, these are early studies or either animal studies or small sampled human studies, or not well-controlled studies, which suggests that there's some potential efficacy for certain cannabinoids, even more so CBD, cannabidiol than THC, in treating health conditions like pain. Again, some of the symptoms like pain associated with multiple sclerosis, controlling childhood seizures, and maybe even opioid addiction. But the bottom line, again, is that there's simply a lack of high quality research. And again, not just to be able to make definitive statements about how effective a particular cannabinoid is. That again, the cannabinoids are these key chemical components of cannabis plant. So not only do we not have a clear understanding of the efficacy of certain types of cannabinoids to treat specific types of diseases or symptoms, and also at what doses, but we're also don't know if they're, even if they were, whether they're better in some way or less expensive than existing treatments. And of course, lastly, if they're safe. In other words, if there are any negative side effects associated with them. So one important thing to keep in mind when discussing or making any decisions as individuals and families for using marijuana for medical reasons is that it does increase the risks for over-intoxication. So if you're going to a marijuana dispensary in your state that allows marijuana for to be smoked or eaten for medical reasons, remember that there is a chance that you can become over intoxicated. Also, remember that marijuana and alcohol, that there are marijuana and alcohol or other drug interactions that can occur. For example, research shows that a small amount of marijuana and a small amount of alcohol greatly increase the crash risk, more so than using marijuana or alcohol use alone. There's also, with the use of marijuana for medical reasons or recreational reasons, increases the chances of experiencing psychosis, highway accidents, problems with memory as well as attention, decision making, and potentially even reduced IQ. Of course, addiction and dependence. And lastly, sort of a side effect, but a very important secondary or side effect is access to and harm to children and youth because of adults using medical marijuana. So warning labels that are missing from medical marijuana oftentimes, in my estimation, this is my attempt to lay out a warning to any individual or any group that's considering medical marijuana use, and that is to make sure that you think about this very carefully. So if you're going to use the plant or extract forms, that you weigh it against the potential both acute and chronic health and safety risks. And again, as I said before, the secondary harm to youth by youth being able to see this being used, model its use, access to it, and then end up increasing youth use of marijuana. And I don't think anybody wants that, or very few people want that because of the harmful effects to young people. Marijuana is legal. It was legal just a week ago in 28 states in the District of Columbia, but now that has grown to 29, which shows that, again, these laws are quickly changing. West Virginia just passed, I think last week, a law allowing medical use, but each of these states are at different stages of rolling those out, and each state varies dramatically in some cases as to which ailments can be treated, for example, and how you access the marijuana and permission to get it, and so forth. So I refer you back to your particular state and state laws and regulations related to that. But there's a map showing, again, it's outdated because actually should be, well, it says 29, so, but I think they're including the, yeah, see there, they don't have West Virginia, which is right here, just below Pennsylvania. They don't have Virginia, West Virginia, identified as a state that now permits marijuana for medicinal purposes. Some more information about this topic on medical marijuana. This, again, I think you need to keep these things in mind if you're considering medical marijuana use, so that at this point in time, medical marijuana, again, does not have controls for purity. It doesn't have, oftentimes it doesn't have the dosage on it, or you're taking it, you're smoking it, or you're eating it and you don't know how much you're taking. Again, there's a lack of information about side effects and safety, potential for drug interactions, and efficacy, just like you have for any other prescription or over-the-counter drug. So this whole idea of medical marijuana is a very, very unusual concept. Pro-marijuana groups also at the same time promote smoking or eating marijuana for treating of literally dozens of unapproved medical and health issues. I mean, here's a list of a few of them. Now, some of these, I mean, they just seem counterintuitive. I mean, to smoke marijuana to treat asthma or emphysema, not let alone herpes, or to promote well-being, when in fact we know of the harmful effects, both mental and physical. To increase concentration, when we know that memory and concentration are negatively affected with smoking marijuana, and expanding life expectancy. Many of these are, again, based on these self-reports or maybe even wishful thinking, but certainly not hard data, at least not at this point in time. Just to highlight one of these problems, again, purity. In Colorado, the first state in the nation to allow recreational marijuana use, they're having quite a challenge with trying to assess the level of pesticides in the marijuana that they're selling, both for recreational and medicinal uses, and trying to control that. And the same is with other types of things that can get into marijuana that is sold. Remember, FDA and other federal agencies, because marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug, they are not involved in ensuring the safety or the purity, let alone the efficacy of marijuana use. So you have pesticides in it, you have mold and mildew, and all types of other things can be in that. And remember, when you smoke marijuana, you've got some 400 chemicals in it. Many of them are unknown, and so it is definitely an issue of caveat emptor. The purchaser, the buyer, needs to beware. As I mentioned before, state laws differ dramatically on the medical conditions that can be treated. One state might allow treatment use of marijuana for treating PTSD, which, by the way, there's not really solid evidence of that, and there's sort of conflicting evidence, and may actually exacerbate PTSD effects. So, but one state may allow the use of medical marijuana for treating PTSD, another state may not. Oftentimes, states will allow sort of a generic, just pain, treating pain with marijuana. And so research suggests that marijuana could be helpful in treating short-term pain. Of course, because the effects only last so long, you'd have to be inhaling or ingesting marijuana throughout the day and night if you wanted to have full coverage of pain, treatment of pain. So it's obviously not an answer for chronic pain, but nonetheless, pain is oftentimes used sort of as a generic health problem, and it's one that's oftentimes misused. So pain will be used by individuals just to get access to marijuana use, not for legitimate medical reasons, but just for recreational purposes. Item number 4, I've already, item number 4 is because federal law prohibits marijuana from a Schedule 1 perspective, and I think there's certainly pushback from physicians, particularly those especially trained in addictions, that prescriptions are not permitted. So if you go to a clinic, or sometimes these clinics are nothing more than wellness outfits, and they might have a physician associated with them, but there's no real medical, no necessarily real medical diagnosis that's required, and so that's why you'll get a referral, a card that shows you've been referred or recommended, and then you can go to your dispensary and pick up your medical marijuana. And again, I continue to highlight the fact that there's this conflict at this particular time in our history of states allowing medical marijuana use, recreational marijuana use, and then you have at the federal level, you've got marijuana being identified as a Schedule 1 drug still, with no medical benefits and high risk for harm. So clearly, something has to give here. I think because research is showing that marijuana does have some potential medical effects, rescheduling of the drug would seem to be in order. But whether that'll happen or not, everybody needs to just stay tuned. It's going to be very interesting. At the current time, laws legalizing medical marijuana, again, are ahead of our scientific knowledge. So we really have, laws, and we've got policies, and we've got products that are being really ahead of and are not being driven by scientific knowledge as much as they are by demand. And so so it's really an interesting time in our country and throughout the world as we're seeing similar things in many other nations. And so, again, if you're going to be using marijuana for medicinal purposes, you have to really, really do the research and do talk to medical professionals about it. Um, and if you want to, and look for that evidence-informed information and read the studies. Yeah, you could start by going to our website, preventionpluswellness.com, because we do have a lot of good literature on there, particularly in our blogs and our news. So, and this I think even becomes a more thorny issue when you're talking about a parent, um, using marijuana to treat some symptom of a child or an adolescent, because again, there's no studies that have shown efficacy for anything for children or adolescents. So, and there are um, potential side effects. So you've got, just to take for an example, you've got situations where children may have these rare disorder where they'd be seizing maybe dozens of times a day, and so these are parents that are desperate to help their children and alleviate this painful situation, and so they may be using marijuana to treat that. They may find that there's some benefit to that. There may be less seizures associated with that, but we don't know what the other effects are, particularly on brain development. So it's a it's a it's very difficult and again a dangerous situation until we have more research. Let's switch gears now and talk about prevention strategies. There are cost-effective, I should say there are effective prevention strategies, and I believe cost-effective prevention strategies, treatment strategies as well. And before we jump into them, we may want to, first of all, address this issue of what influences youth to use marijuana or any substance for that matter. So just from a broad perspective, here are 5 factors. You can ask yourself which you think are more influential for influencing youth to use marijuana in your region. But there are 5: parents, peers, media, individual factors, and environmental factors. So from a parent perspective, if you have a parent that's modeling use at home, in other words, they're using marijuana, smoking it, eating it, modeling in many behavioral theories has been shown to be very key to changing behaviors, animal behavior as well as human behavior. So any parent that's using marijuana for medicinal purposes or recreational purposes should really not be doing that in front of their children. If they are using it for medicinal purposes, that's a little bit different, and that might open up some discussion of the dangers for children and adolescents. But it certainly is not a good idea for parents to be using marijuana recreationally to get high in front of their kids, and they need to be communicating that to their children, communicating that there are myths like the ones we had just earlier discussed and misconceptions about the use and the harm associated with marijuana. And parents should also make known their expectations for the youth, and particularly that they expect them not to use marijuana while they're young, to hold off until they're adults and then make that decision as to whether they're going to try it or not, or and that to do so at their age is unacceptable to them as parents. And then good parenting includes close monitoring, especially when youth go from preteens to teenage and they start getting out on their own. And that means monitoring not just at home, but when they're out of the house, who their friends are, where they're with, what they're doing at night. The closer the monitoring, the better the parenting. So sort of from a from an international perspective, you might call it trust but verify, and that's what works according to research in keeping teens safe. Secondly, there are peer factors, modeling. If kids are using marijuana, if they're talking about how it, if they prove its use, those are important issues. Media, and unfortunately, at this point in time, young people have access online and environmental images promoting recreational and medical marijuana use, they see this, they see the content, they see the images, and these are promotions. The marijuana industry is trying to sell these products just as our, industries try to sell alcohol and try to sell tobacco, and there are little to no controls on access of this promotional information, and young people may not be able to differentiate industry promotions from, legitimate information about marijuana. So that's why it's important to have youth be exposed to, I think, um, marijuana advertising and marketing training. And so we at Prevention Plus Wellness do offer a really great screening survey and PowerPoint slides to educate kids about, um, you know, giving them marijuana advertising literacy. Very effective and important type of education for youth. Individual factors, very important. They include perceived harmfulness of beliefs. We talked about this in our part one of the training, because nationally we're seeing this perceived harmfulness of marijuana use among youth going down, and that oftentimes almost always parallels an increase in use among youth. So we're seeing across the board, across age groups, 8th grade, 10th grade, 12th grade, across the nation, and that perception of marijuana harmfulness is decreasing. Norms are increasing. That is this idea that my friends are using, my adults are using, my friends approve of it, adults approve of it, maybe my parents approve of it. Those need to be corrected. Self-identity related to substance use, and there's always been a culture factor related to marijuana, and so being identified as a stoner is an unhealthy identity, and there are many other more healthy identities that we want to have youth um, develop. The self-efficacy to that is the self-confidence to be able to say no to offers to use, and to stay out of away from people and places where there's use of marijuana. And then healthy habits like being uh, regularly participating physical activity and sports and art and music and other pro-social things, and eating healthy and getting sleep and controlling stress. All those things are very important as protective factors and in developing positive self-identity. And lastly, environmental factors, particularly access to use. So access in the environment in general, but also access at home. Is there easy access? Is marijuana laying around? Is it unprotected? Is it easily visible? And related to that, are there some signs that you can use to help you determine whether or not your youth is using marijuana? The answer is yes. There are some physical signs, physical changes that you may notice in the left-hand column and behavioral changes in the right-hand column. Now, these are not foolproof indicators of marijuana use, but nonetheless, they're things to keep an eye on. Bloodshot eyes, fast heart rate, sleepy, being lethargic, lack of coordination, munchies or increased cravings for snacks, and dilated pupils, all could indicate marijuana use, as well as seeing your child that might have confusion or lack of focus or all of a sudden unusually talkative. Of course, hopefully you would catch this earlier than later, grades that may be suffering, or all of a sudden a lack of motivation to study and be productive, misjudging time, or certainly a secretiveness. All of those could indicate use of marijuana or some other problems in a young person's life. I think these signs of paraphernalia use and environmental signs, I think are a little bit more indicative of potential marijuana use by a young person. If you see small pipes laying around, little glass pipes or metal pipes, if you see shredded leafy debris or seeds lying around, that could be actually marijuana itself. cigarette or other types of rolling papers, which would be used to roll marijuana into joints. Very small bottles of oil could actually be marijuana concentrates. Small metal clips could be roach clips to smoke a joint down to the very end. Visine or other eye drops could be an attempt to try to hide the bloodshot eyes that result from using smoking marijuana. Incense, also to hide the smell, and of course a skunky smell from burning that combustible um, marijuana. So I did mention there are some effective ways of preventing and treating marijuana, and you could find them from different sources. For example, SAMHSA has the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices, NREP, NREPP, but I'm not, I mean, the lists that they have are not, they have some limitations. They have one list that they've provided which has only 2 or 3 programs in it, so it's too narrow. Another list they provide is too broad, it seems, in my opinion. So that's why I recommend this database of inventory of programs for the prevention and treatment of youth cannabis use from the Washington State Institute of Public Policy, I think it is, WSIPP. And you can get it online. You can just search WSIPP, Washington government. You'll be able to pull up the report. You'll be able to pull up the inventory. It's a very, very good inventory, just recently updated. And its focus is very much so on, on the youth cannabis use, and it includes both prevention and treatment. And they do a real good in-depth job of not just looking at efficacy, but cost-benefit analysis. And you'll find on that list, there's 2 programs that I'm going to now switch gears and just do a little, shameless promotion. But there are 2 programs on that list and on other lists, including NREP, for prevention, evidence-based prevention that we offer at Prevention Plus Wellness. The SPORT, Prevention Plus Wellness program for youth, and InShape, Prevention Plus Wellness program for college-age young adults. Both of those programs are unique in that they're screening and brief interventions. In fact, they're single-session programs, so they could be implemented in literally any setting where young people are. And they're unique in that they integrate the promotion of fitness and health habits like physical activity, sports, healthy eating, stress management, and positive identity development. And so they're very unique and cost-effective programs. But there are others that are listed on this database from Washington State. What else can teachers do? What else can schools do to help protect people from marijuana harm? I've got a rather long list of things. Things I'm sure that schools are already doing, some teachers are doing, but things that are nonetheless good to keep in the back of your mind, and maybe you can up your game if you are in a school system, or you can ask your kids' teachers if they're doing this, your kids' schools, check into it. So communicate. Teachers can communicate their expectations that their students should avoid marijuana use. Why? Because it just makes sense, because marijuana can have a negative effect on their learning and their success, in the classroom, in sports, in relationships, in life, but directly affect how well they do, in school. Secondly, discuss healthy habit alternatives to dealing with stress and to promote positive identities and self-images, like continually promoting sports and physical activities, healthy eating, sleep, relaxation, non-drug relaxation, again, meditation, yoga, even prayer, whatever non-drug use. Thirdly, just describe marijuana myths and short-term social and health risks with your students. These short-term social and health risks, like you'll look awkward, you'll look silly, you'll embarrass yourself, very powerful to young people, much more powerful than talking about any kind of a risk to them that might occur, 30 or 50 years from now, cancer, heart disease, whatever the case might be. So, and regarding this, we do have some great tools on our website. We've got again, another screening, a survey, quiz, and PowerPoint slides which discuss um, uh, youth uses and harm, which can be used in the school setting. Number 4, have students complete goals to avoid marijuana use and to increase their healthy habits like those that we use in our all of our programs at Prevention Plus Wellness LLC. Number 5, monitor for signs of marijuana or other drug use and alcohol use among your students. Discuss school districts' marijuana, alcohol, and other drug policy. Make sure marijuana is explicitly listed in there. And of course, there are thorny issues that may be coming up if you're in a state that allows medical marijuana use, and if an adolescent has a recommendation and parental approval, that has to be addressed in the school's policy. So there are definitely some interesting issues that have to be addressed in school policy nowadays when legalization continues to expand. Number 7, stay informed about the latest changes in marijuana laws and risks and prevention strategies. That's what we're all about. So you can easily log into our website, preventionpluswellness.com, and just put in a simple email address, and then you'll be logged into our weekly um, um, emailings about marijuana information. Number 8, provide media literacy training. I already talked about this. We do have tools to do that for your classroom. Number 9, present accurate evidence-informed information, education, prevention programs, and materials. Number 10, educate parents on how they can protect their children and teens. Now, again, children are going to be exposed and at risk for poisoning and harm, and particularly children. And so, if you're in again, a state where there's even if you're not, but especially if you're in a state where there's legalization at any level, parents need to be informed about how they can best protect their children and to keep that marijuana use of marijuana out of the hands of children so there's no overdosing. We talked again a little bit more about this in part 1 of this training, but we do offer a marijuana awareness school and community media campaign, and there's a ton of information there that can be used, including parent information, community information, quizzes and slide programs and blogs, and it's all ready to use, ready to go materials. It save you lots of time and energy to just take these. You can tailor them if you want. You could co-brand them by putting your organization's name on them, and then you can get the word out in your schools and your communities to start addressing this and dealing with the fact that there's the perception and beliefs that there's that marijuana is harmless, and all these myths and misconceptions about marijuana. Number 11, educate communities about marijuana terms, misconceptions, norms, and risks. And again, our media campaign can help you do that if you want to take a look at that on our website. And intervene when you think of students using marijuana. At the same time, parents need to be helping communicate with their youth. And now these parent tips do to a certain extent parallel those that we just discussed for the schools or any kind of a youth group, but also, and so you could see that there's some similarities, like number 1, talk to your youth about marijuana myths, set clear expectations that you as a parent are dead against them using marijuana until later on in life, and then explain why. Protect the youth from accessing marijuana at home, locking it up, hiding it. Number 4, correcting inaccurate norms that they might think like all of their peers are using, because they might have heard somebody talk about it. They might have even seen one person use it, but it's natural for people to extrapolate and say, oh, everybody's using. That needs to be corrected. Everybody is not using. Very few youth use, very few adults use, very few youth and adults think that young people should use. and these norms need to be corrected because otherwise they'll give young people, you know, um, implicit approval to use marijuana. Number 5, emphasize participating in healthy pro-social activities, like I said, sports and art and music and business and whatever, anything other than, you know, volunteer work, church, anything other than substance use. 6, help your youth set self-improvement goals. 7, use a home contract if you need to increase clear communication with your youth. Contracts have the advantage of identifying and writing, you know, what the expected behavior is and the consequences of breaking that behavior. We do have home routine contracts on our website for parents that need them. Number 8, be positive role models and don't use marijuana in front of your youth. Number 9, monitor your youth's friends and whereabouts throughout the day and night. And never glamorize or promote marijuana, alcohol, or other drug use in front of your youth. So you need to really be careful of what you say in front of youth about substance use. Last part of this training, I will go through very quickly some slang that I think is continually changing. Certainly from the 70s, 60s, and 70s, there's always been a culture or subculture, if you wish, about marijuana use. You just have to go back and look at the Cheech and Chong and all the way up to today with the stoner movies. But one term that you should be aware of and may not be aware of unless you have a state where there's legalization of marijuana for medical or recreational uses is dispensary. That's where you can actually, that's where is allowed to be, marijuana products are allowed to be sold legally. There's just a snapshot of one. A bud tender is sort of a play on the word bartender, and that's somebody who's behind the counter that can answer your questions and actually sell you these products. And oftentimes these products are grouped by flowers and extracts and edibles. Flowers, the actual dried marijuana that you would smoke it. And extracts are those high potency concentrates. And edibles can be anything from candies to cookies to, you know, chocolates and caramels and on and on. A pre-roll is just as the term indicates, it's a joint. It's a marijuana cigarette that's sold at a dispensary. There's some examples there. A cone is apparently a European-style joint. So apparently in some European countries, their joints are rolled in the shape of a cone. Pothead is an old term which is a bit derogatory, and so pothead is not a preferred term, and pot is not a preferred term by the marijuana industry. And they're sort of conflicted with this idea of a stoner term because while they liked stoner, and there have been a lot of movies and subculture about stoners and comedies like those dealing with Seth Rogen, where you've got this fun-loving character who's smoking pot all the time, smoking marijuana. They may be a little forgetful or slow or goofy, but they're just lovable. The industry likes that to a certain extent, but then they're also trying to get beyond that and normalize marijuana so that everybody should be using it all the time. There was a recent blog that we posted about how the marijuana industry is pairing different types of strains of marijuana use and trying to get people to test them out with different types of beers or alcoholic beverages. And so again, trying to make marijuana be something that it should be used throughout the day and night, something to get you up in the morning, something to energize you before you exercise, something to help sedate you, to chill you, to help make conversations easier, and on and on. 420, we just passed 420. That refers to the date, April 20th, which is often, this unofficial marijuana holiday. So there's lots of parties throughout the country and world. It's a so-called stoner holiday. The term may have come from California, where high school students met at 420 after school to smoke weed. That's one thinking about where the term 420 comes, but nowadays it could mean anything from a marijuana-friendly people or places to this event, which we just had that date 420, which again is a celebration of all things marijuana. 710 is the word oil printed upside down, and it often refers to this dabbing of cannabis. Dabbing is the uh, vaporization of a concentrated oil, hash oil or honey oil, as it's sometimes called, which we talk more about in part one of the training. A rig or oil rig is a glass pipe, a water pipe that's used to smoke this, do this dabbing or vaporize this concentrate. Skunk can either refer to a specific strain of marijuana, like super skunk, for example, is a particular strain, or could refer to any pungent smelling cannabis. And similarly, Kush. Kush is oftentimes a specific strain, like banana Kush, but it could also just refer to marijuana, generally. Sensimilia is an old term, not used as appear to be used as often, at least according to the marijuana industry. It did refer at one time to top grade cannabis, no seeds. And then the opposite of sensimilia would be swag. So that's poor quality marijuana. In other words, it has a lot of seeds and stems in it instead of just the flowering part. And so, sensimilia, swag would be like, they give you an example of swag would be somebody at a party they're saying, "Oh, dude, why are you serving us this nasty swag?" Just this low quality swag because it has seeds in it and stems, and so it's not high quality marijuana. That's the best I can. That's the best I can do with my attempt to highlight swag. But other terms, dank is a strong smelling and or high quality marijuana or anything good. And so you'll see T-shirts, I think, sometimes have dank. Anything good. Spliff is a combination marijuana and tobacco rolled together, either in a joint or a cone, or even in a blunt, which is a cigar shape. And a green out, I thought, was an interesting term. I don't see it used very often, but I wanted to show it to you because it highlights the fact that even the marijuana industry highlights the fact that there can be a overdose of marijuana. Overdoses by themselves don't cause physiological death. However, overdosing has caused death through homicide and suicide. So, so you've got this resulting overdose, which the green out refers to like an alcohol blackout, but it refers to having like a panic attack and paranoia or falling asleep, losing a sense of time, and essentially going to emergency medical center because you've overdosed in this marijuana, which can happen certainly easily for children because they're not tolerant, they don't take very much, but also for newbies or beginning users, and especially nowadays because the potency of marijuana, both the flower as well as especially the extracts, is so strong in compared to the past. And we talked at length about that in part one of our training. For more evidence-informed marijuana resources, again, I refer you back to our website where we have free blogs. We have, as I mentioned earlier, evidence-based marijuana prevention programs, Sport and In Shape. We have the Marijuana Awareness School and Community Media Campaign. We've got customized marijuana training. We've got a lot of marijuana quizzes and slide programs. And then here's a whole list of other marijuana resources, which are legitimate resources. You can find them on our website, Prevention Plus Wellness, and then go in the upper right-hand corner and just search under Marijuana Awareness Resources. So just type in Marijuana Awareness Resources, and you'll pull it up. And there's some good sources from as I've talked about earlier, NIDA sources, the FDA, Narcanon. There's some Partnership for Drug-Free Kids, Medline, Healthline. And so there's some good sources there. We're going to continue to build on that list of information. And that's it. We really appreciate you joining us today. For those of you that are listening live, if you've got any questions or comments, just jot them down in the live chat and I'll try to answer them in just a moment. But for the rest of you, thank you all for some way, if not entertaining. And thank you for all you do in your lives and for joining us. God bless you all. Bye-bye. And so now at this point, I'll see if anybody has any questions. I don't see any questions. Nobody's mentioned anything. Nobody's typed any live chat information. So I will say, for those of you that did join us live, thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.